Welcome to R&R Living Life, part 10 of our Western Queensland trip. The following is a collection of photographs to show our family and friends what we have seen, what the country was like, and hopefully show some of the distances we have travelled. We are on the homeward stretch, the last leg of our journey, but there was still some impressive sights to see. From the Uline Park on the Warrego Highway before Mitchell, Arrest Creek on the Mitchell-St George Road, small towns struggling to survive, and much, much more. The golden wheat was stunning, not to mention the long, undulating stretches of bitumen and the lack of traffic making travelling so much more enjoyable. What a now adventure this Western Queensland trip has been, from lots of places I had only heard about and had never visited. There are so many resilient, hard-working people living in this part of Queensland. It was amazing to see. It certainly made me think of how easy we have it now living in town, where everything is just down the street. On leaving Augathella, we made our way along the Landsborough Highway to outside of Morven, where we joined the Warrego Highway, a journey of around 100 kilometres. I was fascinated by the ever-changing scenery from open country to cleared tracts of land, hilly country and scrub forest country. Sometimes the road was crowded with trees, but we could see through the trees enough to see what was further afield, much of it being cleared scrub. Rick and I talked a lot about country people making a living in the different types of lands, running various forms of livestock and agricultural practices, each one just as difficult in this day and age as the next. I take my hat off to those early pioneers who really did it tough, trying to forge a living in some of these isolated and remote places. Properties no longer seem to have one component to farming, but a combination of different aspects, and in the end I think it comes down to Mother Nature, if people want to continue to live in this area of Queensland. Mother Earth is certainly a mystery at times, with droughts, floods, fire, and whatever else she likes to inflict on us. As the old saying goes, it never rains, then it pours. In 1845, Major Mitchell compiled the first records for the area around Morven, encouraging pioneers to venture here. We continue on the Warrego Highway through the small town of Mungallala, situated on Mungallala Creek. Rich in pastoral history, Mungallala highlights the resistance, endurance and challenges faced by early settlers. The town was on the twice-weekly Cobb and Co stagecoach route from Roma to Charleville, a distance of 283 kilometres. With the Western Railway line reaching Mungallala in 1888, seeing the end to the Cobb and Co mail runs. As we neared Mitchell, we made a stop at Uline Park, a reserve created to protect and highlight a roadside population of the rare Uline tree, a relic of the extensive rainforest vegetation that once covered much of Australia between 1.8 million to 10,000 years ago. The tree is a sole species, having no other close plant relative. It was a time when eastern Australia was covered in rainforests and megafauna of giant kangaroos and wombat-like creatures roamed the land. It was also the time when the first humans arrived in Australia, up to 50,000 years ago. Our camp for today was at the Neil Turner Weir, just outside of Mitchell, a small town on the banks of the Maranoa River, named in honour of Sir Thomas Mitchell, who explored this area in 1846 during an expedition to find an overland route from Sydney to the Gulf of Carpentaria. The property, Mitchell Downs, was taken up in 1854 by Edward Morey. Its first homestead, situated at the corner of Mary and Winchester Streets, was subsequently destroyed by floods of 1864, and the ruins were taken over by Thomas Close and became the Maranoa Hotel. This was virtually the beginning of the community settlement that was to become the town of Mitchell. I was still on the trek to find out more about the Kenneth brothers, so we took a drive out to Arrest Creek to the monument commemorating the members of the police force and Aboriginal trackers who fought the Kenneth brothers throughout Australia and where they were arrested. The Kenneth brothers are said to be Australia's last bushrangers. In 1902, Police Constable George Doyle and Station Manager Albert Dulkey, a distant relative, were hunting Patrick and James Kenneth over the theft of a pony. They came upon the brothers at Lethbridge Pocket in the Carnarvon region and were murdered. A reward was offered for the Kenneths' capture, and they were caught after 3 months on the run at Arrest Creek near Mitchell. The sculptures represent the capture of Patrick Kenneth, along with the sculpture of Jimmy, who at the time had got away on Paddy's Knob not far from the creek. Jimmy was eventually surrounded by his captors and forced to surrender. From Mitchell, we continue along the Warrego Highway through the small towns of Amby and Muckadilla. The land around Amby is used predominantly for grazing on native vegetation, with some crop growing. Amby Quarry, located on the western side of town, is a lava flow of pure basalt, 10 metres deep, 5 kilometres wide, and 64 kilometres long. It is quarried for construction of roads, bridges, and dams. Fossils can be found occasionally in the lava. Amby, originally called Amby Creek, became a township in 1883 and forms part of the western boundary of the Outback region. It can best be described as where the grain and the grazing belts meet. Amby Downs Pastoral Station is believed to have been established before 1860. Nearing Roma, we passed through the small town of Muckadilla, with its whistle-stop railway siding, and once home to the famous Muckadilla Baths, reportedly having healing properties. The surrounding country is used for grazing and cropping, with some of the slopes of the highest peaks southwest of the town densely forested. We continued our journey on to Wallumbilla, where we stopped at the Wallumbilla Calico Cottage. What a cottage, full of interesting handcrafted gifts, homemade goodies, and full of information. We browsed the cottage's local produce, art and crafts before setting off exploring the Heritage Centre full of interpretive displays, historic memorabilia, and many old photographs of the early days. At the Wallumbilla railway station, we learnt about the district's tragic rail disaster of 1956, a collision between the Westlander and the Western mail trains. We passed through the little town of Toowoomba, settled in 1865 on the eastern border of the Maranoa region, and features predominantly in the history of Cobb & Co coach services, with the last horse-drawn coach in Australia running from Toowoomba to Surat in 1924, and on to Jalaka with its enormous wind farm. First came the railway in 1879, then the town. Jalaka is also the site of the first efforts to eradicate the invasive prickly pear cactus. It was hard to miss the Jalaka Hotel or Pink Pub, which dates back to 1908, as we drove through the sleepy little town, making our way to Miles, where we enjoyed a stay with family. Famous for its melon festival, Chinchilla was our next town on our homeward journey. Having once produced 25% of the country's watermelons, rock melons, and honeydew melons, Chinchilla is the undisputed melon capital. Its historic museum features a collection of many important transport pieces, including a steam-driven sawmill and the first ever ticket issued by Qantas for the first flight from Longreach to Cloncurry. There was an excellent display of petrified wood and a prickly pear exhibit celebrating the saving of local and national farmlands from prickly pear by the introduction of the cactoblastis moth and larva from South America. We were soon on the last leg of our adventure, with Dalby and Oakey in our sights. Rick and I had lived and worked in Dalby, so there was nothing new that we were interested in, so kept caravanning. At this stage our sights were on heading home. Bypassing Oakey, we were on the homeward stretch. I hope you have enjoyed our Western Queensland adventure. To end this episode, I have included photographs not included in other episodes from our 23 days spent exploring this enormous part of Queensland. There were so many interesting sights, amazing scenery, and tough, resilient people we met along the way. Rick and I have had a wonderful adventure into areas that he nor I had been to before. Such an incredible experience. Thank you for taking the time to watch. Stay on the lookout for our next adventure. Take care and stay safe. Cheers for now. Rick and Rosemary. R&R Living Life.